They will tell you I walked up to the throne alone and whispered 4 words, and that the Alpha King cleared the entire court before the sound of them had finished leaving my mouth. All of that is true. What they leave out, what no one in that hall could have known, is that I almost did not do it at all. I stood at the back among the unranked for the length of the whole long ceremony, with the words sitting in my mouth like stones. And I told myself, as I had told myself for a week, that it was not my place, that an Omega does not speak to a king, that the safest thing a woman at the bottom can do is stay quiet and stay small and stay alive. Then I thought of the boy, and I crossed the floor. I should tell you who I was before I tell you what I said, because the two cannot be untangled. My name is Sable. I was 24 years old that winter, and I was the lowest thing in the great hall of Stoneholt, an Omega, which in our packs is not a rank so much as the absence of one. Omegas do the work no one names. We carry the water and bank the fires and disappear against the walls so thoroughly that lords will discuss treason a pace from your elbow because they have genuinely forgotten you can hear. I had spent 8 years learning to be furniture. I was very good at it. I want you to understand that being good at it was a choice, and that I had reasons, and that the reasons are the whole story. Because I had a thing I kept hidden, and an Omega with a hidden thing learns to keep very still. I dreamed true. Not always, not on command. I could no more summon it than you can summon a particular dream tonight. But when it came, what I saw in sleep had happened, or was happening, somewhere real. As a child, I had said so out loud, once, to the wrong person, and I had learned what they do to Omegas who claim to see. So I stopped saying it. I banked it down like a fire you do not want the neighbours to smell. I carried the water, and I disappeared against the walls, and I told no one for 8 years what I saw at night. And then I started dreaming of a man in a stone room above the sea. He was thin and grey and patient in the way of people who have stopped expecting the door to open. There was salt on the one high window and a gull on the sill, and a long scar through one eyebrow, and he sat and he waited, and I did not know him from any man in the world. I dreamed him 12 times across the autumn, and I told myself he was no one, a stranger, a trick of a tired mind. Then the boy showed me the carving. The boy was Finn. He was 6, and he was the most forgotten creature in a hall full of forgotten creatures, and that is saying something when the hall contains me. He was the king's own blood, his brother's son, but his father had died before he could speak in full sentences, and his mother had followed within the year, and a grieving king with a kingdom to hold had not known what to do with a small, silent nephew. So the small, silent nephew had simply slipped lower and lower through the ranks, the way a dropped coin works its way through floorboards until it is gone. Finn did not speak. He had not spoken in years. He lived at the edges, and the kitchens fed him out of habit, and no one met his eyes. And I, being furniture, being safe, being the one creature in Stoneholt who ranked below even him, and so could not lower him by my attention, I had taken to leaving bread where he would find it, and then sitting near where he sat, and then, eventually, letting him fall asleep against my side by the banked kitchen fire, while I mended by the last light. He carried one thing always: a small wolf, carved from pale wood, worn smooth at the ears from years of a child's thumb. And one night, half asleep against me, he turned it over, and I saw, cut small into the underside, a long line through one of its carved brows. A scar. Through the eyebrow. Exactly where the man in my dream wore his. "Who made this?" I asked him, very quietly. And Finn, who did not speak, who had not spoken in years, put his thumb over the carved scar and looked up at me, and his lips moved around a shape with no sound in it. And the shape was a word, and the word was father. I went very cold by that banked fire, because I had been dreaming a dead man. And dead men do not sit waiting by high windows with the salt coming in. I will not pretend I decided cleverly. I lay awake 3 nights doing the arithmetic of my own life. If I said nothing, I stayed furniture, I stayed safe, I stayed alive. If I spoke, an Amiga claiming to see, claiming the king's dead brother breathed, they would call it dark practice on a good day and witchcraft on a bad one. And there is only one ending to that story, for a woman at the bottom. Nobody was asking me to risk it. Nobody would ever know I had not. But the boy put his thumb over a carved scar and shaped the word father with no sound. And I found I could not carry that and stay furniture both. So at the next court, a formal gathering, the hall packed with ranked wolves and visiting lords, the king high on the wolf throne with his face shut like a door, I left the wall. I crossed the open floor while 300 people turned to watch the Amiga forget her place. I went up the dais steps no Amiga climbs. The guards were so astonished that a creature like me would do such a thing that not one of them moved to stop me in time. And I reached the throne, and I leaned to the ear of the most feared man alive, and I whispered 4 words. I will not tell you what they were. Not yet. You are going to hear them the way he did, in the dark, later, when they were the only thing left in the room. For now, you only need what the court saw, which was this. The Alpha King of Stoneholt, who had broken challengers without changing his breathing, who had not shown fear in living memory, went the colour of old ash. His hand closed on the arm of the throne until the wood complained. For one breath he looked not like a king at all, but like a man standing on a floor that has just told him it was never solid. Then he stood, and his voice came out level, even though his face had not caught up to it, and he said, "Out, all of you. The hall is closed." 300 wolves do not question that voice. The hall emptied like water from a cracked jug. Lords, warriors, servants, the lot, spilling out the great doors in a confused tide. And the guards looked to him, and he said, "You as well." And they went, and the doors boomed shut, and then it was only the 2 of us in a hall built to hold 1,000. And the Omega was still standing on the dais where no Omega stands, and the king was looking at me as though I had reached into his chest and closed my hand around the one thing he had spent 6 years pretending was buried. "Say it again," he said, quietly, like a man asking for a wound to be reopened, because he could not believe it had been real the first time. So I said it again, and this time you will hear it. "Your brother is alive." For a long moment, he did not move at all. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone rough at the edges, the level court voice cracking down the middle. "Leaf drowned," he said. 6 years ago, in the spring floods, below the eastern falls. We searched the banks for a month. My chancellor recovered, and there he stopped. The way a man stops when a word he has said 1,000 times suddenly tastes wrong in his mouth. We buried what we found. "You buried a story," I said. I had nothing left to lose by then. I had already crossed the floor. "I do not know what is in that grave, sire. I only know what I have seen 6 nights this autumn. A thin grey man in a stone room above the sea, salt on the window, a gull on the sill, and a scar. I touched my own eyebrow. Here. Your nephew carries a wolf his father carved. The carved wolf has the same scar. I did not know whose face I was dreaming until a silent child showed me, 2 nights ago, by the kitchen fire where the 2 of us are kept. I watched the most powerful man in the territory absorb that the brother he had grieved for 6 years might be breathing, and that the proof was being handed to him by the lowest creature in his hall, and that the lowest creature in his hall had also just told him his nephew lived forgotten by a kitchen fire. I have seen men take blows in the training yard. I had never seen anything land the way that landed. "Why?" he said at last. "Why would you risk this? You understand what they call women who claim to see. You understand I could have you taken from this hall tonight, and you would not see morning. Why would an Omega walk up to my throne and put her own neck under the blade for a dead man she has never met?" And here is the thing I had not planned to say, the thing that came out of me unrehearsed in that empty, echoing hall. "Because his son shaped the word father with no sound in his mouth," I said. "And I have been the one sitting beside that boy in the dark for 2 years, and I could not keep this from him, whatever it costs me. He has been grieving a father the whole world told him to forget. If there is any chance the world was wrong, then somebody had to be brave enough to be wrong out loud. It might as well be the one person here with the least to lose." The King of Stoneholt looked at me as if he were seeing me, not the Omega, not the furniture, but the actual woman who had crossed his floor for the first time in his life. And his wolf, I would learn later, had been seeing me for considerably longer than that. But that night, all I knew was that he did not call the guards. He said, "What is your name?" "Sable, sire." "Sable." He said it carefully, like a man setting down something he intended to pick up again. "You will tell no one what you told me. Not the boy, not yet. You have just made yourself the most dangerous person in my kingdom, and you do not even know why." I did not know why, but I was about to find out, and the finding out nearly got me killed. It turned the next morning in the person of the king's chancellor. His name was Osric, and he had served 3 alphas, and he had a face like a closed ledger, all neat columns and nothing showing. He was the man who had organised the search for Leaf 6 years ago. He was the man who had recovered the body. He was the man who, the king told me later, had stood at his shoulder through every black month after, and counselled him gently, always, to let the dead rest, to seal the rooms, to stop walking the east corridor, to grieve and move forward, and never, ever look back toward the eastern falls. I had walked into court and whispered 4 words, and within a day, the Chancellor, who had spent 6 years keeping the king's grief sealed, knew that the seal had cracked. He came to the kitchens himself, which chancellors do not do, and he looked at me the way you look at a sum that has come out wrong, and he smiled. "The Omega who climbed the dais," he said. "There is talk of nothing else. They say you whispered in the king's ear and turned him to ash. They are saying you have a sight, dark gifts in a low creature." He folded his hands. "You should know how these stories end, child. I have seen them end. The kindest version is exile. Shall I tell you the unkind ones?" I said nothing, because furniture says nothing, and I had remembered, too late, how to be furniture. "I am going to do you a great mercy," Osric said. "I am going to confine you to the south cells for your own protection, while the court's passions cool. A few weeks. Quiet. Safe." His ledger face did not change at all. It would be a tragedy if a frightened pack tore apart a poor Omega in the night for witching their king. There was nothing kind in it, and we both knew it. By midday, I was behind a locked door, in the cold, under the hall, cut off from the king, cut off from the boy, cut off from anyone who might believe me. And I understood that I had been neatly removed from the board by a man who smiled while he did it. I sat in the cold, and I thought, he moved fast, faster than fear. A man who only feared the Omega's witchcraft would have waited to see if the talk grew. A man who moved before breakfast was not afraid of my gift. He was afraid of what my gift had seen. I am going to sit with you in that cold cell for a breath before I tell you what I dreamed there, because I would like to ask you something while it is only the two of us. Have you ever known a true thing that nobody wanted to hear, and been shut in the dark for the knowing? Tell me where you are listening from tonight, down in the comments. I read them all in the quiet hours. And if you want to see how a woman locked in a cell with nothing but the back of her own mind turns it into the blade that frees a king, stay close and follow along. What I dreamed behind that locked door changed everything. That was the first crack in the floor under the Chancellor, and I felt it open in the dark of that cell 2 days before the king did. Because here is what I had time to do, locked in the cold with nothing but the back of my own mind. I slept, badly, and I dreamed. And this time I did not dream the stone room. This time I dreamed the night of the floods 6 years gone, and I saw what the carved wolf's owner had seen, and I saw a younger Osric on the wet bank below the eastern falls, and I saw that Leaf had not drowned at all. He had been put in a cart, alive, bound and breathing, with the Chancellor's hand on the rail and the Chancellor's voice telling the driver to go north and keep him quiet and let the king believe the river took him. A king who has lost his only brother to an accident grieves and goes on. A king who still has a brother with a claim, a brother beloved, shares his power. Osric had not wanted a king who shared. Osric had wanted a king hollowed out by grief and leaning on the one steady hand at his shoulder. He had not killed Leaf. A body can be found, a body raises questions. He had done the colder thing. He had stored him. I woke in the cell with my face wet and my hands shaking, and the whole shape of it clear, and no way at all to tell a soul. The king found the way for me. He came down to the south cells himself on the third night, which kings do not do, the way chancellors do not come to kitchens, and Osric did not know he had come. He stood on the wrong side of my locked door in the dark, the most feared man alive, and through the iron grille he said, low, I have walked the east corridor. I have stood at the door I have not opened in 6 years. I went through Leaf's rooms tonight for the first time since we sealed them. A breath. His travelling chest is gone, Sable. The one thing a man takes if he means to be moved a long way. We buried a body the river gave back, and Osric named it Leaf, and I was too broken to look closely, and Leaf's travelling chest is not in his rooms. The grille was cold between us. You did not have a dark gift. You had the truth. And I confined you to a cell on the word of the man who has been lying to me for 6 years. He has not been lying about a death, I said, through the iron. Sire, he has been lying about a life. Leaf is alive because alive he is useful. A grave answers questions. A prisoner answers to whoever holds the key. I told him then what I had dreamed in the cold. The cart, the bound man, the Chancellor's hand on the rail, the road north. I watched it land through the grill, watched 6 years of grief turn in a single moment into something with a far sharper edge. And I learned what an alpha king looks like when grief becomes rage and has somewhere, at last, to go. "Where?" he said. "North, a stone room above the sea. I can find the shape of the coast from the dream, the falls, the gulls, the angle of the light. Give me a map and I will find you the place." I gripped the bars. "But sire, if Osric learns you have walked those rooms, if he learns you believe me, he will not leave a prisoner alive to be found. The mercy he is so fond of will become a different kind of mercy very quickly. We have until he understands that you have stopped grieving and started looking." We did not have that long. The king got me out of the cell that night, over the objection of the guard, with the simple expedient of being the king. He brought me up into the hall, and he did the thing that cost him, the thing I did not ask for and did not expect, the thing that I think the court has not finished talking about even now. He called the council at dawn, Osric among them, ledger-faced, certain, and in front of all of them he set the omega at his right hand, on the dais, where the empty chair had stood for 6 years. And he said, "This woman is under my protection and my hearth. Any hand laid on her is laid on me. Any voice that names her witch answers to me for it." The council went white and silent. Osric's face did its closed ledger nothing, but I was watching his hands, and I saw the knuckles go pale on the table's edge. He had been so careful for 6 years, and the king had just announced, to the one man who most needed not to hear it, that he had stopped believing the Chancellor and started believing the Omega. I knew, in that moment, that Osric would move that night. So did the king. We were ready for the wrong thing. We thought he would run, or burn his papers, or send a rider north to kill the prisoner before the king could reach him. He did send the rider. The king's own second, a broad, quiet man named Bronn, was already on the North Road by dusk, under sealed orders to ride for the coast and find Leaf. And Osric's rider went out the same gate an hour later, meaning to reach him first. That race was real, and it mattered, and I will tell you how it ended. But it was not the thing Osric did that night that nearly finished me. What Osric did was come for the proof, and the proof was me. He understood, you see, that a dream is not evidence. A king may believe his omega, a council needs more. The one thing that could damn Osric before the full pack was the living word of the man he had stored, and the one person who could lead anyone to that man was the woman with the sight. Kill the prisoner in the north, and the grave's lie holds a while longer. But kill the seer in the south, and there is no one left who can even point the way. He was a man of neat columns. He chose the simpler sum. He came to my room past midnight with 2 men and a length of cord, and that same patient smile. And he had chosen his moment well, because the king was in the war room with the council, managing the panic of a court that had just watched its alpha set an omega above his lords. And there was no one in the world who knew Osric had come for me, except Osric. There was one thing he had not counted on. He had not counted on the boy. Finn had been sleeping in the corridor outside my door. He had taken to it since they let me up from the cell. The silent child curled against my threshold like a dog that has finally been allowed back inside. And when Osric's men came down the dark hall, Finn was awake. And Finn understood, in the wordless, certain way of children who live at the edges and learn to read danger before they can read letters, exactly what was happening. And Finn, who had not spoken in years, who had shaped the word father with no sound, opened his mouth in the dark corridor and screamed. He screamed one word, and the word he chose, the first sound to leave that child in 6 years, was my name. It brought the corridor guard. It brought, by terrible good fortune, the king himself, crossing from the war room, close enough to hear a child scream a name into the dark. And it bought me the 4 seconds I needed, because Osric's man had a blade out and meant it for my throat, and a king and a guard were still a corridor away, and the only person in reach of me was a 6-year-old, and I was not going to let a child step in front of a blade meant for me. So I stepped in front of him instead. I want to be precise, because the court tells this wrong too. I did not wait to be saved. I put my body between Finn and the knife, and I took Osric's man's wrist in both hands, and Omega's hands, water carrier's hands, stronger than anyone ever bothers to expect. And I turned the blade wide, and it opened my forearm to the bone instead of finding the boy or my throat. And I held on through it, screaming, while the door burst and the king came through it like the falls themselves coming down. I will spare you the worst of what Magnus did to the man who had drawn steel near that child. I will only say that the man lived because the king needed him to talk, and that Osric did not run because there was nowhere left to run, and that the king held me on the floor of that corridor with my arm bleeding through both our hands and his face finally open, while a 6-year-old who had just spoken for the first time in 6 years sobbed my name over and over into my shoulder, because now that he had found the word, he could not stop. It would have been enough, almost, to end there. But a dream is not evidence, and the council had gathered, woken and frightened, and Osric, bound now but unbroken, ledger-faced even in irons, said the thing he had been saving. An Omega's hysteria and a mad child's noise, he said, to the council, smooth as ever. She has bewitched the king into turning on his oldest servant. Where is your proof, sire? A dream? Bring me the brother you say I stole. Bring me Leaf, living, and I will put my own head on the block. You cannot. Because he drowned, and this creature is a liar, and you are a grieving man who wants too badly to believe her. He was gambling that Bronn would not reach the coast in time, or that Osric's rider would reach it first. He was gambling that the proof was 3 days north and bleeding out or already drowned for real by now. And he very nearly won that gamble, because he was right that we had no proof in that room. Except that I am a seer, and the one thing a seer can do, if she is willing to pay for it, is reach. I had never done it awake. I had never done it on purpose. Everything I had ever seen had come unbidden in sleep, soft, sideways. To reach for it deliberately, in a waking room, with my arm laid open and the council staring, and a man's whole lie hanging on it. That was a different thing entirely. And I knew, the way you know the depth of cold water before you go in, that it would cost me more than I had ever paid. I took the carved wolf from Finn's hands. I closed my cut and bloody fingers around the thing Leaf had made, the smooth wood and the small cut scar, and I reached north along the line of it the way you follow a thread in the dark. And I let the sight take me. It did not come soft. It came like the sea. The cold drove into me until my teeth locked and my breath stopped in my chest. The weight of 6 buried years pressed down until I could not have stood if Magnus had not been holding me up. My nose ran blood and my opened arms screamed and the whole hall went to a roaring grey distance, and I held on. I held the wolf and I held the thread, and I did not let go. Because somewhere on the cold edge of it, there was a thin grey man in a stone room above the sea, and I needed the room to tell me where it stood. And it did. The shape of the coast, the falls to the south of it, the broken tower with the seabird's nest, the name carved by a former keeper into the lintel, which I had never seen and could not have invented, which I spoke aloud into that silent hall with blood on my mouth. Gullspire. "Send to Gullspire," I said, and my voice came out of a very long way off. "The broken tower north of the high falls. He is in the keeper's room under the salt window. Send anyone, send everyone. He is alive tonight, and your Chancellor's rider is on the road to make sure he is not alive tomorrow." Then the cold took the floor out from under me, and I went down into the dark. And the last thing I felt was the king's arms not letting me reach it. I am told I was 3 days getting back. I am told I burned and shook and spoke to people who were not there, and that a silent boy did not leave my side, and that the King of Stoneholt sat by an Omega's bed and held her unbloodied hand, and did not rule his kingdom at all for 3 days, which a king is never supposed to do. I do not remember it. I remember waking on the 4th day to grey morning light and a weight against my side. And the weight was Finn, asleep. And across the room, a thin grey man with a scar through one eyebrow was sitting in a chair by the window, with the salt light on his face, watching his sleeping son, and weeping without any sound at all. Bronn had reached Gullspire first, by 11 hours. The rider Osric sent never came back. The North Road keeps its own counsel. They had broken the keeper's door and found a thin, patient man who had stopped expecting it to open, and they had brought Leif home down the same road his brother had been told carried only his body. Here is the part the court tells right, for once, because 300 wolves saw it. When I was strong enough to stand, the king held a full court, the same hall, the same throne, the same packed ranks who had watched the Omega cross the floor. And he did not seat me at his right hand this time. He came down off the dais. He crossed the open floor himself, all of it, past the lords and the warriors, the way his wolf had apparently been wanting to cross it since the first time it caught my scent by the banked kitchen fire 2 years before. And he stopped in front of the lowest creature in his kingdom, and in front of every wolf who had ever looked through me, he took my unhurt hand and he went to one knee. An alpha king does not kneel. The hall made a sound, like the whole pack inhaling at once. "You walked up to my throne with nothing and gave me back my brother and my nephew and the truth," he said. And he did not lower his voice for any of it. "You took a blade meant for a child. You bled on a council floor to break a lie 6 years old. There is no rank in this pack high enough for what you are, so I will make one. Be my Luna. Not because my wolf chose you, it did, long before I had the sense to, but because I am asking, freely, knowing you owe me nothing. The lowest of all of you," he said to the hall, "is the bravest soul in this kingdom, and I would have her above me to the end of my days, if she will have it. I have spent my whole life knowing the price of things and keeping very still and very small and very safe. I looked at a king on his knee on the cold stone, and at a thin grey brother weeping in the light, and at a boy who had screamed my name back into the world, and I found that staying small was no longer the safest thing, nor the thing I wanted. I will have it, I said. And I will not describe the kiss to you, except to say that something I had banked down and kept hidden for 8 years was finally, in front of everyone, allowed to burn in the open. And that for the first time in my life I did not disappear against any wall, because the whole hall was looking, and I let them. The fallout was real. It always is. A king who kneels to an omega cracks something in the old order that does not close again easily, and there were lords who left the hall stiff-backed, and rivals who took note of a pack whose alpha would upend 1,000 years of rank for one woman's word. Let them note it. Osric was stripped of his name, his columns, and his head. The king gave him a trial, which was more than he gave Leaf, and the trial gave him the wall. The grave below the eastern falls was opened, and the body in it was named at last. A drowned drover from a downstream village whose own family had been told a different lie, and they were brought to Stoneholt and given the truth and a hearth. Because the king had developed, that winter, a powerful intolerance for lies that let a family grieve the wrong thing. It is a year later now, and I am the Luna of Stoneholt, which still makes the older lords swallow wrong, and I find I do not mind their discomfort even a little. Leaf walks the gardens he was stored away from. He is slow to laugh and quick to go quiet, and he and I understand each other. The two people in this hall who know exactly what it is to be kept somewhere small while the world is told you are gone. Finn talks now. He talks constantly. He has 6 years of words saved up, and he intends to spend every one of them. Mostly at me, mostly at meals. And no one has the heart to tell him to lower his voice. Least of all the king, who flinches with pure, helpless joy every single time that child opens his mouth. The east corridor is not sealed anymore. The door at the end of it stands open all the time now, propped with an iron wolf the smith made as a wedding gift. And Leaf's rooms are full of Finn's noise and the salt light. And Magnus walks that corridor every day on purpose. Because for 6 years, he took the long way around it, and he has decided he is done taking the long way around anything. He still cannot ask me a small thing without the asking landing heavier than he means it to. Pass the bread. Will you walk with me? A man who learned, very late and at great cost, that asking is the thing he can give that taking never could. I have learned to hear the weight in it. I always answer freely, with my own mouth. It is, after all, the voice that crossed a floor. So tell me, did you know, before he did, that the danger was never the woman who whispered? Did you catch the Chancellor, or did he catch you, the way he caught a king for 6 years? Tell me down in the comments where you are listening from tonight, and whether you have ever carried a truth you were afraid to say out loud. If this one warmed you, stay close and follow along. There is another waiting, and I promise you, the next woman crosses her own floor. Until then, if you know a true thing, be brave enough to be wrong out loud. You never know who has been waiting 6 years to hear it.